When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, third shift. User, RN4Life3. Posted, February 21st, 1996.
There are some nights that never really end. They just lose their witnesses, and if you've worked emergency medicine long enough, you know exactly what I mean by that. The clock will move forward, the sun will come up, the hospital will shift back into its daytime rhythms, but the night itself stays lodged somewhere behind your eyes, replaying in fragments you don't ask to keep. That night started the way so many of them do, with rain slicking the roads and people deciding again that they were the exception to gravity, physics, and consequence. 7 patients came in from one crash. County road, no lights, head-on at speed. 2 sedans and a pickup. A drunk driver crossed the line and lived. Everyone else paid for it. I was in Trauma Base C, which meant I didn't see the wreck itself, just the aftermath once metal and bone had already made their introductions. Blood was everywhere from the very first moment, on the floor, on the gurneys, soaking into my shoes, and I remember thinking absurdly about how the floors always look clean on medical dramas, how nobody ever talks about the way blood dries sticky and pulls at you when you try to move, how it smells faintly sweet once the adrenaline wears off. We worked them fast, we always do. There's no ceremony to it. Clothes get cut, names get lost, bodies get reduced to problems that need solving immediately. The first man was already gone when he arrived. Steering wheel folded into his chest so deep it looked like the car had tried to swallow him whole. We still worked on him because that's what you do. Compressions, airway, shock, someone calling times. Someone else trying not to look at the way his neck bent when we rolled him. We called it after 23 minutes. The second patient was a teenage girl, and she kept trying to speak even as her lungs filled. Blood bubbled out of her mouth every time she opened it, and I held her hand because there wasn't anything else I could offer her in those last minutes. Her femur had torn straight through her thigh, bone white and wet under the lights, and when she squeezed my fingers once before going still, it felt like a promise I didn't know how to keep. By midnight, we were down 4. That's the thing people don't understand about mass casualty nights. It isn't one big moment of drama. It's attrition. It's losing people one by one while the clock keeps moving and your body starts to feel like it's being hollowed out from the inside. You stop remembering faces. You remember sounds instead: alarms, shoes squeaking, someone swearing under their breath, someone else crying quietly because this is the first time they've watched someone die and it won't be the last. The drunk driver was the only one who lived. Broken arm, some internal bruising, smelled like whiskey and regret. He kept asking what happened over and over, like if he said it enough times, the answer might change. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to grab him by the collar and make him look at the empty beds lining the bay. Instead, I charted. I wiped blood. I did my job. The last of the 7 coded just after 1:30. Older man, chest crushed in, internal bleeding everywhere. When we cracked his ribs for compressions, I felt one snap under my palms, a sound and sensation I'll never forget. Blood came up hot and fast, soaking through my gown, and I didn't stop. We called time at 1:47 a.m., and after that, there was nothing left to do. The bodies were zipped into bags and lined up behind curtains, waiting for transport. 7 lives reduced to paperwork and plastic. The trauma base smelled like iron and antiseptic and exhaustion. At around 3 in the morning, the hospital goes quiet in a way that feels wrong, like the building itself is waiting to see what happens next. I was wiping down a gurney when I heard a sound behind me. Wet. Not a monitor, not footsteps. Wet. I turned, already tired, already annoyed, expecting a bag to have shifted or a line to have come loose. Instead, I saw one of the body bags move. Just slightly, a shallow rise in the middle, like a breath taken by someone who didn't quite remember how. I stood there, staring at it, waiting for my brain to correct the error. It didn't. The zipper began to split from the inside. Slow, deliberate. The bag bulged and tore, and a hand punched through, fingers bent sideways, skin gray and slack. The body convulsed and spilled out onto the floor, heavy and wrong, chest jerking as it sucked in air through its broken teeth. His eyes snapped open, filmed over and empty, and he made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I screamed. And that's when the others started. Curtains rustled, zippers tore, something kicked free and hit the floor with a wet slap. The teenage girl sat up, her broken leg dragged behind her, bone scraping tile, blood peeling off her in sheets. Her mouth opened and something thick and dark poured out before she lunged toward me. I ran 3 steps. Something grabbed my shoulder. I spun and drove my elbow back and felt it sink into flesh that gave too easily. Blood sprayed in bright pulsing arcs, painting the wall, and the man staggered back with his throat crushed open. He didn't fall, he just tilted his head, watching the blood pump out of him like it was interesting. And then he came at me again. I slipped, went down hard, the floor cold against my back. The girl dropped on top of me, her weight wrong, bones shifting like gravel under skin. She snapped at my face and I shoved her head back, my hand sliding into the ruined cavity of her cheek. Flesh tore, something popped, blood fountained and soaked my sleeve. I got free and ran. The supply room door slammed and I threw the bolt just as bodies hit it from the other side. The metal bowed, nails scraped, teeth thudded. I stood there shaking, surrounded by shelves, listening to the sounds of the dead, trying to remember how to be alive. And when the door finally gave, I swung the first thing I could grab. The older man came through first, his chest split open, ribs splayed wide, blood pumping out in thick spurts with every step. I brought the drawer down on his head and felt his skull crack, spraying gray-pink matter across the wall. He kept coming. I hit him again and again. He fell twitching, and the others poured in behind him, short, fast, and violent. A syringe through an eye, a jaw kicked loose, teeth tearing skin. By the time the sun crept in through the windows, it was quiet again. The final kind.
Subject, where the trees lean in. User, Fern33BB. Posted, March 14, 1997.
Everybody in my family knew not to go out past that old logging road once the light started to go flat. That wasn't superstition so much as instruction. Passed down the way you pass down which bridge floods first or which dogs bite. You could walk the creek, fish the bends, even cut through the lower pines if you needed to shave time off a hike. But once the forest changed shape, once the trees started growing closer together, thinner and angled like they were listening, you turned around. No one ever told me why. They just said, that's far enough. I grew up in a place where woods weren't scenery. They were utility. Firewood, hunting ground, somewhere to be left alone. I learned early how to move quietly, how to watch for snakes, how to read the ground for signs. I wasn't scared of the forest. I respected it the way you respect something bigger than you that doesn't explain itself. The first time I crossed that line, I didn't realize I'd done it. I was walking the old road because it was there, because I had time, because I'd been restless in a way I couldn't put words to. The road, I hadn't seen a truck in decades. Saplings grew up through the gravel. Moss filled the ruts. It curved more than a road should, bending around trees instead of cutting through them. The light changed before I noticed the trees. Everything went dull. Not darker exactly, just muted. Like someone had turned the contrast down. The air felt thicker, harder to move through. Sounds didn't carry the way they should have. I stopped hearing birds. Even my footsteps sounded wrong, like they were being absorbed before they could echo. And that's when I remembered the rule. I told myself I'd gone far enough and turned around. The road behind me didn't look the same. It was narrower, more grown over. The bend I just walked around wasn't there anymore. I stood still, trying to match what I was seeing to what I knew was supposed to be there, and the forest didn't rush me. It didn't need to. I kept walking. I don't know how long I was in there. Time did not behave the way I expected it to. The light never fully dimmed, but it never brightened either. My watch still ticked, but it felt like it was lying to me. Every time I thought I heard something, a movement, breathing, footsteps, it stopped the moment I focused on it. Eventually, I saw the markers. They were tied to trees with twine, Old strips of cloth faded to near white. Some were knotted, some were braided. Some were wrapped tight enough to cut into the bark. I recognized the style without knowing why. It felt familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. My grandmother used to tie rags just like that around fruit trees after storms. Said it helped them heal. I called out. I don't know who I thought might answer. My voice sounded smaller than it should have, though, swallowed by the space between the trunks. I kept moving, but slower now, watching the ground. The forest floor was unnaturally clean. There was no deadfall, no rot, just packed earth and roots that surfaced like knuckles. I found the clearing by accident. It wasn't large, just a shallow bowl in the land where the trees grew even closer together, their branches leaning inward. At the center stood something that might have been a stump once. It was too tall for that now, shaped like it had been worked by hand, though the surface was rough and uneven. Something had been carved into it. Not letters, symbols. Lines and curves that repeated, layered over one another like they'd been refreshed again and again. They looked old, but not abandoned. The cuts were clean, maintained. And at the base of the stump were offerings. I didn't think of them as offerings at first, though. Just objects, a rusted pocket knife, a child's shoe badly worn, a wedding band dulled with age, things people carried with them without thinking. Things they might give up if they thought it would buy them something. I backed away, and that's when I heard it. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like the suggestion of one, a sound that had rhythm but no words, coming from everywhere at once. The trees seemed to shift in response, branches creaking as they leaned closer. I understood then why no one explained the rule. You don't give explanations for things that listen. I turned and ran. The forest resisted me. Roots caught my boots. Branches snagged my clothes. The road appeared and disappeared in pieces, never quite aligning. I tripped and went down hard, knocking the breath out of myself. For a moment, I stayed there, pressed against the ground, listening to that sound grow closer, and it stopped when I stopped moving. That felt important. I stood up slow, and the forest waited. I didn't run again. I walked. I kept my breathing even. I didn't look behind me. Eventually, the trees loosened. The light shifted. Sound returned all at once. Birds, wind, the distant rush of the creek. I crossed the line without fanfare, and when I got home, my grandmother looked at me for a long time without speaking. "You went past it," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, and she didn't scold me, didn't ask what I saw. She just went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a strip of cloth, already folded, already prepared. She tied it around my wrist, tight enough to be uncomfortable. "That should help," she said, "for now." I asked her what it was. She shook her head. That's not the right question. Years passed. I left, came back, tried to forget, but the woods followed me in small ways. I'd find twine in my pockets I didn't remember carrying, wake up with dirt under my nails. Sometimes I'd hear that almost voice in the space between waking and sleep, patient and familiar. After my grandmother died, I found her notebooks. They weren't journals, but more like records, names, dates, symbols sketched over and over, mentions of trades, of keeping the balance, of what happens when people stop paying attention to boundaries. The last entry was simple. It doesn't chase, it waits. It remembers who owes. I don't walk that road anymore, but sometimes when the woods go quiet all at once, I feel the trees leaning in, and I know it knows my name.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.